about the superannuation aspects of the budget, we're joined now by Professor of Finance Susan Thorpe. Susan, what were the announcements that really stood out for you in the budget?
There were some interesting announcements about superannuation. The most important, I think, structurally, was the announcement that no longer would you have to earn $450 a month in order to be eligible for superannuation guarantee payments. So I think this policy is directed mainly at women, but will also help anyone who's got small casual jobs, several of those, or who's just entering the workforce, or who moves in and out of the workforce in part-time work. These people previously haven't been required to be covered by the superannuation guarantee, and this change in the budget does now require employees to make contributions for them. How well this works, I think, is also dependent on the introduction of the legislation related to default superannuation funds, where changes are afoot to ensure that people don't acquire multiple funds. Having this introduction of the superannuation guarantee for low-paid workers will be much more effective if they only have one fund.
This was much vaunted as a budget for women, and yet the government stopped short of mandating superannuation on paid parental leave. Can the government still say this is truly a budget for women when a big ticket item like this fell short?
So this is only a relatively small measure, in my view, towards closing some of the gaps between particularly women who experience interrupted labour force participation and those who have a more continuous labour force participation. And we have to be clear that this is predominantly women, but affects a lot of men as well. There are many reasons why people take breaks from the workforce, and supporting superannuation guarantee payments during periods of parental leave certainly would have been an advantage to many people who've got carer responsibilities. So yes, that particular option wasn't taken up by the government, and along with other changes related to superannuation in the budget, while important, I think are probably likely to have relatively small impacts.
What are your thoughts on some of the other superannuation measures in the budget, for example, extending downsizer contributions?
Yeah, so most of the other measures really relate, apart from the changes to people's ability to make voluntary contributions at older ages. Again, this is a fairly important change for people who want to contribute after they're retired. But most of the other changes, the three other measures announced in the budget, really relate to housing. And I think that some of these budget measures are jumping off the recommendations of the Retirement Income Review that noted that one of the ways that people can enjoy a more well-supported retirement is by accessing equity in the family home. So the downsizer change allows a younger age group to contribute $300,000 to their superannuation on selling the family home. And this will be a boost to people who decide to do that around retirement. Again, it's a marginal change. It's a change in the age eligibility for this factor, but it's a step, I think it's a step in the right direction. And of course, the other change that they made that is related to, well, there are two other changes related to housing. One in the accumulation phase to encourage more people to use the First Home Super Saver scheme by allowing a larger withdrawal from that scheme. And the second one is to encourage people to use the pension loan scheme, which is again a way of accessing equity in housing. It has to be said that both the First Home Super Saver scheme and the pension loan scheme are policy measures that have been used by very few people. So it'll be interesting to see whether the adjustments that have been made in the budget this time actually encourage a higher level of use of those policy measures.
Do you think that these measures being announced in the budget that you just mentioned signal that the government will go further down that path in the future with regards to accessing equity in homes for use in superannuation?
It's a step in that direction, and as we've just noted, it is related to the recommendations that the Retirement Income Review put forward. So I think there's a sort of independent voice there giving some support to the idea that we need structures that allow people to access their housing equity. And I think that there are concerns on two fronts, both that it's becoming increasingly difficult for particularly younger households to access the housing market. And secondly, that more people are carrying housing debt into later ages and into retirement. So there are pressures on those fronts, as well as the need to allow people access to better retirement incomes.
Okay, Professor Thorpe, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tracy.